I'm 75. I suppose I should start by saying that, because it makes some of the things I'm about to tell you understandable, maybe. Or maybe it just explains why I say them with the quiet resignation of someone who's been watching herself fade slowly for decades. I never imagined I'd live this long, and certainly never imagined I'd be here, alone, in a house that smells faintly of old wood and fading sunlight, thinking about a life without sex, not in a casual way, not in some abstract, it's normal for old people way, but in the deep, aching way that comes from knowing it's gone forever. I think about it almost every day, though I don't say it out loud to anyone. It's strange how something that used to define so much of your existence can slip into absence so quietly that you barely notice, until one day it's just missing. And by then there's no reclaiming it, no restart button, no chance to try again. When I was in my 20s, sex was all of life. It was reckless and messy and delicious. I remember the way it made me feel alive, how it made me feel seen. And yet, even then, there was always this undercurrent of guilt. Nothing serious, nothing anyone would call shame, but a quiet sense that I needed to behave, to be responsible. My parents, my upbringing, the way society whispered that desire was something to be carefully packaged and controlled. But I had a husband. Well, my husband eventually. And we fell in love, young, naive, and hopelessly in love. Marriage in those days felt like a promise of forever. We had 2 children, a boy and a girl, and in the early years, our intimacy didn't disappear, but it started to shift. Not suddenly, not like a switch flipped off, but gradually, almost imperceptibly. I remember carrying laundry baskets down the stairs while he read the paper, thinking I would get to him later tonight, later in life. But life, as it always does, had other plans. Later became bills, school drop-offs, work responsibilities, arguments about trivial things that felt monumental at the time. Later became exhaustion, exhaustion became distraction, and distraction became absence. By the time I was in my 40s, our home had a rhythm to it that was comforting, but devoid of passion. We slept together, yes, but more as 2 bodies occupying the same space than as people who once lit each other on fire. Sometimes I'd catch him staring at me and remember the way he looked when we first met, hungry, curious, desperate to know me. And I would feel a pang of something I could never quite name. Regret, maybe, nostalgia, definitely. Desire, less and less. And yet, I told myself it was normal. That intimacy evolved. That love wasn't about the physical anymore. But I wasn't ready for what that evolution meant. I didn't see how quietly it would hollow me out. I didn't see that, by the time the children left home, the laughter and warmth that had once drawn us together would be replaced by silence and polite conversation. I didn't see that when I tried to reach for him, to rekindle what once had been effortless. It would feel forced, almost foreign. And in that quiet distance, I started to retreat too, burying myself in work, in volunteer hours, in the endless minutiae of daily life. Anything to avoid noticing that the part of me that had once thrilled at touch, at closeness, was slipping away. In my 50s, I began to notice the changes in my body more clearly. Hormones, menopause, whatever name they gave it, everything shifted. I felt different, lighter in some ways, heavier in others. Sleep was harder, energy was fleeting. The curve of my body, the softness of my skin, the way I moved, all of it felt foreign sometimes. And with that change, the desire that had once been so automatic and joyous waned. I felt guilty about it. I blamed myself. But more than that, I felt powerless. My husband, bless him, noticed too. We tried, sometimes, quietly, awkwardly, but it was never the same. Never the way it had been when we were young and reckless and the world seemed infinite. By my 60s, the reality had settled in. Sex became a memory. Not the kind of vivid memory that makes your heart race, but the kind that comes like a ghost, a faint echo that visits unexpectedly in quiet moments. I'd catch myself thinking of his hand on mine, the warmth of his lips, the way our bodies once seemed to fit together without effort. And then I'd sigh, because those days were gone. Not just gone, they were impossible to retrieve. He was gone too, taken by cancer that moved faster than grief could prepare me for. There's a kind of loneliness in losing the person who shared your body with you, the one who made intimacy familiar and safe. It's a loneliness you can't describe to anyone who hasn't lived it. It's not just sexual absence, it's absence in the marrow of your life. After he died, intimacy felt absurd. The idea of starting over, of opening myself to another person, seemed impossible. Who would understand the years we had shared, the rhythm we had built, the way desire had been folded into every quiet corner of our lives? And so I accepted it, or at least I tried to. I immersed myself in routines, in friendships, in reading, in walking around the neighborhood watching seasons change. I gave myself small comforts, small pleasures. A cup of tea in the morning, the feel of the sun on my face, a letter from a friend across the country. And that was enough, sometimes. But then there were moments when it wasn't. When I would wake at 3 in the morning, the house silent, except for the hum of the refrigerator, and I would remember. I would remember the way it felt to be wanted, the way skin pressed against skin could make your heart stutter. I would remember the small intimacies that weren't even sexual, the brush of a hand, a whispered word, the way we laughed and touched without thinking. And I would ache, not with desire exactly, but with the raw knowledge that something I had once taken for granted was gone forever. People don't talk about this, not really. Not in polite conversation, not in books, not in films. We tiptoe around the reality that desire fades, that bodies change, that intimacy can vanish long before life itself ends. We pretend that love is infinite, that sex is endless, that the fire never dies, but it does. Quietly, invisibly, almost kindly, in its own way. And if you don't pay attention, you wake up one day and realize it's gone, and there is no bringing it back. I've come to understand that the grief isn't just for sex itself. It's for the connection, the affirmation, the way desire made me feel alive. It's grief for the shared laughter in bed, the whispered jokes in the dark, the certainty that someone saw you in every way that mattered. It's grief for the way the world used to feel soft, intimate, and endless, and now feels firm, final, and quiet. And yet, in that grief, I've found a strange clarity. I notice things differently. I notice the light through the curtains in the morning. I notice the way the wind feels on my cheek. I notice the way a grandchild's hand fits into mine, the way their laughter makes the world feel a little less empty. Sometimes I wonder if I could have done anything differently. Could I have slowed down, been more present in my 40s, more attentive to the dwindling moments? Could I have prioritized desire, chosen it over duty, over work, over children, over approval? Maybe, but maybe not. Life doesn't give you the luxury of perfect hindsight while you're living it. And perhaps the cost of noticing too early is missing the very things that kept you alive at the time. And so I live with it, with the absence, the silence, the empty spaces. I live with the ghost of desire, with the memory of touch, with the ache of what cannot be reclaimed. But I also live with gratitude. Gratitude for what was, for the years that shimmered with intimacy, for the laughter and the love that shaped me. I live with gratitude for my body, even as it changes, even as it fails. I live with gratitude for the memories, the warmth, the love that remains, even when desire has left the room. I am 75. I will not have sex again, not in the way I once knew it, but I still feel, I still ache, I still remember. And sometimes that is enough. Sometimes that is all the intimacy I need. If this is meaningful to you, hear me. It is okay to mourn the absence. It is okay to acknowledge the hollow spaces. It is okay to remember what you've lost. But also, do not forget that life continues in small, quiet ways. That presence, attention, memory, and love. These are the intimacies that endure. Even without desire, even without sex, even without the bodies that once fit together perfectly. I've lived a long life, and I've loved in ways that shaped me, that defined me, that haunted me. I've made choices, missed moments, assumed I had more time than I did. And I've learned that time doesn't wait. Desire doesn't linger. Life moves forward, relentlessly. And in that movement, we carry both loss and grace. We carry the absence of what was and the presence of what remains. So here I am, 75, in a quiet house, with the sunlight drifting lazily across the floor, thinking about sex and love and the slow, invisible erosion of both. I think about the way it feels to be alive, to feel, to remember, to grieve. I think about the fact that some things can never be fixed, never returned, never reclaimed. And I think about the truth that remains. Even in absence, there is life. Even in silence, there is meaning. Even in a body that no longer desires, there is the capacity to remember, to feel, to notice, to be present. And that, perhaps, is all we ever have.